All right, so it does appear we have some breaking news, some pretty big deal going on here. It's a pretty big deal going on here with Donald Trump, and it appears that he has actually been raided by the FBI. Now, it's pretty surprising, especially because we know that there are two main investigations going on into him right now. One of them has to do with everything related to January 6th, which is kind of a multi-layered thing. It has to do with him, and what he was doing in terms of inciting the rioters, as well as the fake electors scheme and trying to do all this other stuff. But then there's another investigation actually going on to him by the DA, I believe in Fulton County. It's one of the counties in Georgia, but it had to do with his attempt to influence Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia. I don't know if he's still in the position right now. I think he is, but I'm not sure. Him trying to tell him to find the votes. So there's two investigations, basically coming towards him right from both sides. But it appears that there's a third investigation going on now that I didn't actually really know about. And it appears that it has to do mainly with his handling of classified documents. Originally, documents that appeared to be, attempted to be seized because they were supposed to just be held by the presidential archives. And I guess once he handed over boxes that they wanted for stuff to be archived, it turned out I think they found like classified documents, and so like, oh shit, like this guy has a bunch of classified documents that he's not legally allowed to have with him. And so I'm guessing with that kind of evidence, as well as the other evidence that we're seeing, they were able to get a search warrant on his home. But this has to be historic here. I don't think the Federal Bureau of Investigation has ever raided the home of a former president. So, we're setting records here, guys. This is some crazy territory to be in, honestly. We're about to be in a recession with a labor shortage. Think about that. A recession with a labor shortage. Think about that, guys. That's insanity. And now we have, former president of the United States being raided by the FBI. So, this is former President Donald Trump said on Monday that the FBI had searched his Palm Beach, Florida home and had broken open a safe, an account signaling a major escalation in the various investigations into the final stages of his presidency. The search, according to multiple people familiar with the investigation, appeared to be focused on material that Mr. Trump had brought with him to Mar-a-Lago, his private club and residence, when he left the White House. Those boxes contained many pages of classified documents, according to a person familiar with their contents. Mr. Trump delayed returning 15 boxes of material requested by officials with the National Archives for many months, only doing so when there became a threat of action to retrieve them. The case was referred to the Justice Department by the Archives early this year. The search marked the latest remarkable turn in the long-running investigations into Mr. Trump's actions before, during, and after his presidency, and even as he weighs announcing another candidacy for the White House. It came as the Justice Department has stepped up its separate inquiry into Mr. Trump's efforts to remain in office after his defeat at the polls in the 2020 election, as the former president also faced an accelerating criminal inquiry in Georgia and civil actions in New York. And remember that the current FBI chair is actually, the FBI head is actually Christopher Wray, I believe it is, and that was appointed by Donald Trump himself to replace Comey. Says the FBI would have needed to convince a judge that it had probable cause that a crime had been committed and that agents might find evidence at Mar-a-Lago to get a search warrant. Proceeding with the search on a former president's home would almost have surely required sign-off from top officials at the Bureau and the Justice Department. The search, however, does not mean prosecutors have determined that Mr. Trump committed a crime. So they're saying that there's probable cause that he committed a crime as to dealing with, holding classified documents in his private home, which is not legal for a former sitting president to do. And just think about it, bro. In the standard of requirement for evidence and just to even be able to just to have the balls to do this is huge because it's his former president of the United States. It's a massive, massive thing. That's also why, like, the indictments, even if Trump just gets indicted and he doesn't get actually formally convicted of anything, it's a huge deal because even indicting or charging a former sitting president is just such a big deal, right? It says FBI representative declined to comment, as did Justice Department officials. Mr. Trump was in the New York area at the time of the search. It says Mr. Trump, who campaigned for president in 2016, criticizing Hillary Clinton's practice of maintaining a private email server for government-related messages while she was Secretary of State, was known throughout his term to rip up official material that was intended to be held for presidential archives. One person familiar with this habit said that it included classified material that was shredded in his bedroom and elsewhere. The search was at least in part for whether any records remained at the club, a person familiar with it said. It took place on Monday morning, the person said, although Mr. Trump claimed agents were still there many hours later. After working and cooperating with the relevant government agencies, I like how he capitalizes it, this unannounced raid on my home was not necessary or appropriate. Mr. Trump said, maintaining it was an effort to stop him from running for president in 2024. Such an assault could only take place in broken third world countries. They even broke into my safe, he wrote. I think the people trying to claim that it's a political thing, I think, are just ridiculous. I mean, he obviously committed, a potential crime here, and just think about how serious it would have to be for them to do it. It's really hard. They're acting as if, them making this kind of a move towards a former sitting president, just willy-nilly, all chill. There's no risk involved. There's significant risk involved, even if Biden himself was doing it, because presidents don't want to be able to be investigated for stuff that they did because they want immunity. That's why usually it's, a president won't want to go after a former president for something because dude, I don't want the next one to come after me. It's just kind of a bunch of bogus, honestly. So it says, aides to President Biden said they were stunned by the development and learned from it on Twitter. Goes on, says, law of governing preservation of White House materials, the Presidential Records Act lacks teeth. That's a statute, by the way. But criminal statutes can come into play, especially in the case of classified material. So it looks like the biggest thing he could really be prosecuted for here is the classified material that he's holding. Do I think he's actually going to be even charged for anything? Probably not. But honestly, just the fact that the FBI is raiding a former president is fucking bonkers. It's so precedent setting. It's insane. It says criminal codes which carry jail time can be used to prosecute anyone who, quote, willfully injures or commits any depredation, I've never heard that word, that's interesting, against any property of the United States, and anyone who, quote, willfully and unlawfully conceals, removes, mutilates, obliterates, or destroys government documents. Samuel Berger, a national security advisor to President Bill Clinton, pleaded guilty in 2015 to a misdemeanor charge for removing classified material from a government archive. 2007, Donald Kaiser, an Asia expert and former senior State Department official, was sentenced to prison after he convinced to keep more than 3,000 sensitive documents ranging from classified to top secret in his basement. 1999, the CIA announced it had suspended the security clearance of its former director, John M. Deutsch, after concluding that he had improperly handled national secrets on a desktop computer at his home. And so it just goes on to talk about this kind of stuff. It says he was known to rip up pieces of official paper that he was handed, forcing officials to tape them back together. An upcoming book by a New York Times reporter reveals that staff members would find clumps of torn up paper clogging a toilet and believed he had thrown them in. So this is another thing. There was the allegation of those toilet pictures that I'm sure you guys heard of, that he was literally flushing pieces of paper, ripped up pieces of paper down the toilet. That was another allegation. And it would seem based on that, as well as, again, I was talking about this in my other video about the Trump investigation with January 6th. It seems like there's a lot of people who are in the Trump administration who are very cooperative with the Justice Department in their investigations of him. And so I think with the testimony and the cooperation from those people, I think they were basically able to surmount enough evidence to be able to execute the search warrant, to convince a judge to allow them to execute the search warrant, to grant them a search warrant on his home. Otherwise, obviously, it wouldn't be legal for them to just barge into his home, right, without a legal search warrant. So, it says a question of how Mr. Trump handled classified material is complicated because as president, he had the authority to declassify any government information. It is unclear whether Mr. Trump, before leaving office, had declassified materials the archives discovered in the boxes. Under federal law, he no longer maintains the ability to declassify documents after leaving office. So I guess getting into some kind of weird semantical issue here where it's okay, were those documents declassified already, or did he technically declassify them afterwards? But, just a bunch of stuff that's going on here. Some very, very big news. So I guess it's 3 investigations that are going into the guy. 3, not just 2. It's not just the Fannie Willis and the one in Georgia, as well as, the January 6th one with the House that's, giving the Justice Department a bunch of stuff. There's 3 investigations into him. And honestly, to keep it a complete buck with you, I didn't really know much of anything about this situation. We had heard about, stuff he was taking and stealing, but I didn't know they were actually investigating him. I don't know if this was in the news. Did we know that something similar to this was going to happen, or something like this was going to happen? I don't know. But pretty crazy stuff. I doubt he's going to be, again, I'm going to reiterate, just to summarize, I doubt he's going to be indicted on anything. I don't think he's going to be charged for anything. But again, just the fact that a former sitting president of the United States has been raided by the FBI, I don't think that's ever happened in history. Make sure to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But just that alone is so strikingly precedent setting that it is truly bonkers what we're seeing right here, man. I mean, we're about to be in a recession with a labor shortage, guys. A recession with a labor shortage. Think of that. How is that even possible? Anyways, pretty crazy stuff going on in our times in 2022, eh?